And I'm super excited to have Jason here, Jason Dyke here. And Jason is a security consultant that has encountered numerous problems in GCP and the work that he's done in the cloud and AWS. And partly as a result of that, well, he went ahead and created his own tool. Now, I'm excited to end the entire summit on this talk because the very end of Jason's talk is going to be a demo of the tool that he has created. So we want to take you out on a high note here, right? So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Jason here. Jason, take it away.
All right, awesome. Thanks for the introduction. And look at us, we made it. This is the last talk. Thank you so much for joining. My talk is focused on security automation in GCP. And as Frank mentioned, there will be a live demo. So let's see how it goes. I'm pretty excited about it. And security automation is a huge topic. And there's no way I can cover it in 30 minutes, but I'm going to try my best to at least introduce you to different tools that are available on the market, and then talk about event-driven automated remediation. It's a mouthful, but it's something near and dear to my heart, and then we'll do a quick little demo. So the agenda, as I mentioned, introduction, I'll talk about myself for just one slide. We'll talk about security automation. We'll talk about event-driven automation, which leads directly into what's called Project Lockdown, which is an event-driven automated remediation tool that I created. It's completely open source, and it works in GCP. So I can't wait to show that to you, and fingers crossed. And then we'll talk about some takeaways that you can think about over the weekend, because I'm sure everyone's super excited about the weekend. All right, so a little bit about me. I do security consulting for AWS and GCP, so kind of a multi-cloud person. I'm really into Python and Terraform. Project Lockdown is actually written in Python. The logic is written in Python. It's deployed via Terraform. Obviously, I'm into automation and security because that's what my talk is about. So naturally, those things go well together. So if you're interested in any of the other tools or scripts that I've created, you can find them on the ScaleSex GitHub. That's the company that I consult for. There's tons of really cool stuff on there, GCP, AWS, lots of Kubernetes stuff as well. It's not only cloud related, so definitely check that out. In addition, big Pittsburgh Penguins fan, Pittsburgh sports, but I submitted these slides before they were eliminated, but hey, I'm still a huge fan. There's always next year. And if you want to get in contact with me, there's my Twitter, and I also have a website if you're interested in any of the blogs that I've written, any of the open source projects I've done. It's there for you to take a look at. All right, so let's dive right in. With that being said, going to try to fit it all into 30 minutes. So security automation. There are a ton of different tools on the market, ranging from policy as code, something called a CSPM, which is a cloud security posture management tool. There's also the native controls that are available to you in the platform itself. And there's also custom tooling, which is, I'm going to focus on event-driven custom tooling. So if you've been watching any of the talks during CloudSec Next, you've heard of OPA, the Bridge Crew team was here. There's been lots of really good talks about policy as code. And policy as code is a form of security automation, which it might not be looked at that way all the time. So policy as code can be embedded in your CI/CD pipelines, and it can have its policies automatically compared to your infrastructure as code. It's not an event. It's not necessarily an event-driven tool, but it is definitely an automated security tool that's at your disposal. So the second grouping, and this isn't all-encompassing. I had to kind of pick 4 buckets that would fit on the slide so it's not overwhelmed too much. But the second grouping, cloud security posture management tools. Now, the way I typically look at these are all-in-one enterprise offerings. They can have automation, can have automated response. It's usually a single pane of glass dashboard across your entire cloud organization, maybe even multi-cloud, and it centralizes it for you. So these are things like Aqua, you have Prisma Cloud, you have the Lacework folks. You even have a native CSPM tool called the Security Command Center, which is GCP's offering of a single pane of glass tool that you can build automation into. Now, the third group is what I'm just calling GCP native controls. So these are things like GCP organization policies. Now, organization policies are a way for you to establish policy as code, but as security guardrails in the cloud. So it'll cover any type of automated deployments through pipelines. It'll cover console clicks, SDK calls, API calls, you name it. It can affect your entire organization, or it can affect one folder or one project. And an easy example of an organization policy is that if you don't want your resources to be made public, you set the org policy to disallow that behavior, and it is automatically applied. So if anyone has the permissions to do it, they're automatically stopped from being able to do it via the org policy. So that's a type of security automation that I look at. In addition, there's just your standard IAM controls. If the user doesn't have the permissions to do something, they automatically cannot do it. So there's a theme here where there's many different types of automate security in the cloud. It's the way that I look at it. The last bucket, which is going to be probably the last half of this talk, is about event-driven custom tooling. And really, this is about leveraging serverless functions to do your remediations. You don't necessarily have to use serverless, but the talk is titled serverless computing, so that's what I'm going to focus on. It's all about event-driven, and what that means is that when an event happens, when somebody creates a resource in the cloud, a log is triggered, a log is created, and that log flows through a process that we're going to detail later to, let's say, a serverless function, a cloud function. And that cloud function can analyze the resource that is contained inside the log, the log metadata, and it could potentially reverse that decision. So again, we're going to dig into that a little bit more. But first, I wanted to just talk real quick about something to think about when you're evaluating security tools. The two columns that I want to focus on here are the customization and the learning curve. Now, this is my opinion. Some people might disagree with maybe cost, because cost is different for everyone. Learning curve, some people are stronger in certain areas than others. But those two topics are really important when you're evaluating tools. So with something like policy as code, a lot of the open source tools in the enterprise offerings have examples that you can utilize, but they also allow you typically to write your own. Maybe it's in OPA, it's in the Rego language. Something like Terraform Validator is a wrapper around OPA. It makes it a little bit easier. But customization is really important, because what you get out of the box, if it doesn't allow customization, it might not be enough to cover all of your threats or your risks in your environment. So always think about the level of customization you want when you're looking at a tool. And the learning curve, extremely important. So if you pick something that has a really high learning curve and it only supports a language that you don't know, that's a tool that's going to take a while to learn. It's going to be difficult to implement, and it's going to take you a while to implement it. So again, those are my opinions. People might disagree, but always think about, support as well, and cost is very important. But those two are the big ones for me. All right, so why do I care about automation? In the previous talk that you just heard, automation isn't the end of the journey. You also need monitoring and alerting around things that are being automated. And that's something that Project Lockdown has built in, which we'll talk about during the demo. So the benefits of automation. Reducing the risk of human error. So humans are unpredictable. That's just a natural thing. There's no way around it. They can do anything. But automation can generally only do what you actually code it to do. That's ideally. Sometimes there's bugs, things go off the rails, but as long as you put the right checks in place, usually it only does what you want it to do. So using more automation reduces the risk of human error, clicking through the console, which leads into rapid response. Automation's fast. It's way faster than a log being generated, flowing through a pub subtopic, going to your SOC, analyzing the log event, creating a ticket for you to analyze, go out and research the resource in the cloud. Automation does all that for you, and it's much faster. The third bullet is about driving efficiency. So if you use something like policy as code embedded in your pipelines, your developers and your programmers and really all of your cloud users can be more efficient, because if something passes the checks in your CI/CD pipeline, you have greater confidence that it was built securely. And you could be more efficient in churning out products and features as long as they pass the um, the pre-approved checks. You're in a better spot than if you didn't have those. Now, security is everyone's responsibility, so I don't want to make it seem like if you have policy as code, you don't have to worry about security anymore, but you can be more efficient. All right, so the fourth one, the policy as code trend here, the same thing when you use custom tooling or any type of customization where you can write your own security logic, basically. You get all the benefits of source control. It's auditable. You know exactly what you're checking for. You can write unit tests around it to know and have confidence that it's working properly. And it could be versioned as well, hopefully, so that if there's a challenge, you can roll it back. You can't really do that with manual clicks and basically human interaction. And the last one, near infinite scalability. I hesitated to put that there because there's always scalability challenges in the cloud, but your really biggest limit is going to be your quotas versus the amount of bodies you have in chairs or the amount of knowledge you have in one individual who has to go through a backlog of tickets. So those are really the big benefits of automation, and I really wanted to call that out. Okay, so event-driven automation, really the big topic of this talk. So the core components that I'm going to focus on is that you have an API event, which is basically your kickoff of this kind of loop or this process. The API event generates a log event. The log event contains the metadata of who did what, where, and when within your organization or against your resources. This provides the metadata about the event, like the project ID, the resource name, the specific API call that was executed, and all of those can be captured via a filter inside of a log sync. Think of a log sync as a filter and a log director. It routes the logs that matches the filter it has to something else. In this case, it's a pub subtopic. Now, pub sub is GCP's messaging queue. Basically, it is what you subscribe to receive those messages, those log events. It could be an integration with Splunk. It could be a BigQuery data set. It could be a cloud function in this case, which is where you're going to perform your analysis and your action. This is your serverless compute that is automatically invocated when a message hits that pub subtopic. So this is the automated flow that happens over and over again when something matches that log filter. Okay, so this is what it looks like visually. So you have a user here at the bottom left that is executing a set IAM policy. It's making a GCS bucket public. Now, this could be bad or it could be good. In this case, it's bad. We have sensitive data in that bucket. We don't want it public. This user doesn't know that. They can't access it. So they say, I'm just going to make it public so I can access it. That action generates a log event. And that log event travels to the cloud logging API endpoint. Think of it like that. And that API contains all of your log syncs, depending upon where they're set in your organization hierarchy. In this case, we have, for our event-driven kind of security remediation demo, we have a log sync on the organization level. And what that does in the hierarchy of GCP, when you set a log sync, it's called an aggregated log sync. When you set a log sync on the organization node, it includes all of the projects underneath it. So if you tell that log sync, I want you to capture all GCS bucket updates when it's the all users member, it'll do that for all of your projects, any new projects, and any of your current projects. Anytime there's a new event that matches that log filter, it will capture it. So it's an extremely strong resource to use when you're trying to do event-driven remediation in GCP. So back to the infrastructure. So when the log hits that log sync, it goes off to our pub subtopic. Hopefully you're keeping your pub subtopics and your cloud functions, your security resources in in an isolated project that only your security team has access to. That's one of our takeaways at the last slide, so sneak peek there. And then your cloud function is going to analyze the bucket and say, this goes against our policy. You cannot make public buckets. And it does a set IAM policy call, which is basically the inverse of a get, and it removes all users. So generally, that's the flow that we're going to be looking at when we talk about the demo. The demo is actually not going to do JCS bucket. I'm going to do two other scenarios that I think are a little bit cooler. But I wanted to visually show you, this is kind of how the flow goes. And as you can see, it's very simple. You just need a log sync, a pub subtopic, and a cloud function, some roles here and there to make sure that your function has the right permissions throughout your organization. So it's very simple, and it's 100% serverless. There's no infrastructure for you to manage. There's no compute nodes to make sure that SSH is closed. Everything is handled for you. It's all managed offerings. Google does everything for you. All you have to do is supply the code, which sounds easy, but could be a little bit more difficult than you think. Okay, so Project Lockdown. Project Lockdown is an open source event-driven security tool that I created with some of my coworkers at ScaleSync. And it's written in Python and Terraform, so HCL, their infrastructure as code language. It's 100% serverless. The diagram you saw in the last slide is all that there is. Roles here and there, but basically that's it. It's deployed via Terraform, so it's extremely easy to deploy and configure and save your state files. There's been a lot of Terraform talk during this conference, which is awesome. I think that the more people get comfortable and accustomed to Terraform, the easier they'll see managing and operating in the cloud is. So an important feature flag of Project Lockdown is that it's read-only by default. So the one thing I didn't want was for somebody to deploy the solution and not realize that, yeah, it does change things in your environment, but it only changes it in the ways that you allow it to. So by default, it's read-only. You actually have to tell it to be basically have write access. So, and that's a simple configuration flip in Terraform. It's just read. You change the word read to write. And you can do that per remediation as well. So I think Project Lockdown has maybe like 10 to 15 different scenarios right now that it looks for. You can say, I want 9 to be read-only, and one of them I've tested, I'm okay with it. So there's a lot of flexibility there. And additionally, it supports allow and deny lists. So what does that mean? It means that going back to our GCS bucket scenario, if there's a project where you store public-facing static assets in a GCS bucket, you want those to be public because you want your users to be able to see those. What Project Lockdown allows you to do is it allows you to either configure an allow list and or a deny list and say these projects are allowed to go against our policy or our security rules. And that means that you can provide a little bit of flexibility so it's not so iron-fisted. And it allows you to set deny lists as well, where this project can never do anything like that. All right, so some examples of the remediation scenarios, doing a time check. KMS key rotation, we'll jump through that in a second. Public big create data sets, pretty self-explanatory. If you create a public big create data set, it will take away that IAM binding and make it private if it's not in the allow list. GKE ABAC, attribute-based access control is kind of an anti-pattern. It's not the best way to do access control in GKE. So if you create a GKE cluster with ABAC, it will stop your cluster so that it's not running and potentially exposing bad practices. Excuse me. Public GCS bucket, we've hammered on that enough. I think everyone's aware of what that is. The last one is called GCE default service account. So in GCP, there's a concept of a default service account, which is really kind of a starter identity to get you up and running and used to how the cloud works in GCP. By default, it has an overly permissive basic role called the editor role. And that is an anti-pattern. If you want to create custom service accounts that only need the permissions, that only have the permissions that they need. The editor basic role, I can almost guarantee, has way too many permissions. So if you spin up a GCE VM and Project Lockdown is running, scanning your log events, and it has the default service account, it will stop it. And then if you think, well, it's only looking for log events when I create uh, create a VM, it also looks for start events as well. And that's via the filter. So you can customize the filter to different events you want lockdown to be triggered on. You can get really specific, and we'll take a look at those there in the demo. All right, so let me switch over to my browser and we can get started. All right, so let's lay the land a little bit here. As you can see, I have 3 tabs open. And the way we're going to look at this is the first tab is my security project. This is where my serverless functions run. This is where my security topics are. This is going to be where we kind of look at the logs a little bit. Now, the second tab is called CloudSec Next 2021 Allow Demo. This is the project that's in my allow list to kind of show off that functionality so you can visually see how an allow list works with Project Lockdown. In the last tab, switching over to that, is my deny project. This is the bad project. If things are misconfigured in this project, hopefully Project Lockdown will reverse it. So let's get started. And the first scenario we're going to cover are what's called SSL policies. And SSL policies in GCP are basically the way you handle your TLS termination, for example, for your load balancers. Now, going to here to create policy, you pick a name, and you have a couple options as far as what TLS version you use. And you'll notice TLS 1.0 is still available on the console. And TLS 1.0 was sunset a while ago. It is available. So you need to be able to come up with a way to either prevent your users from selecting that. And if there's no ability for you to do that, maybe you don't use policy as code, or there's no IAM permission specifically related to a TLS version, like a condition. Automated event-driven remediation is probably the next best option. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through here and we're going to try to create a SSL policy with TLS 1.0. And the profile here, a profile represents your cipher suites that you will accept in your TLS handshake. So, okay, we're going to save it, which will create it. And what's going to happen is it's going to generate a log event. That log event is going to go to the pub subtopic. Pub subtopic is going to forward to the cloud function. The cloud function is going to invocate. It's going to say, hey, I have a log event for a potential weak SSL or TLS creation. It analyzes it. And then if it says, oh, this is 1.0, it needs to at least be 1.1, it'll update it. So let's take a look here. And then I'm just refreshing it so that we can get a new look at the console. And here you can see now it's 1.1. So Project Lockdown did its job, and it actually caught that somebody tried to create a 1.0 TLS SSL policy. And now switching over back to our security project, let's take a look at our function to see exactly the logs that it output and what it saw. So this is the Cloud Functions console. We have 2 Cloud Functions that are currently running. One is a KMS rotation key, which is the other use case that hopefully I can get to. And the other one is the weak SSL policy. So let's take a look at this Cloud Function. I'm going to click in. And this is the Cloud Function dashboard. You have some really cool metrics. These will get updated in probably about 5 minutes. You can check out some of the environment variables, how it's triggered, who has permissions to it. What we're looking for here are the logs. Now, these logs are specifically, you could do print statements, it can capture like standard out, or you can use the Python logging, which is what we're using in Project Lockdown. So you'll see here at 5:23, about 2 minutes ago, we see function execution started. It received its SSL policy log. So I'm just clicking into these logs so you can see it a little bit better, checking for weak TLS. And then it checks to see, is the project in the allow list? So before it does any analysis, it'll check and say, hey, is this project in the allow list? Is there a deny list? Or is a list not even configured? Because that's also an option for you. And then it says, okay, it's not in the allow list. This SSL policy, CloudSec Next 2021, is using a weak TLS version 1.1. And it immediately posts to an alert pub sub topic. And that's where you would subscribe like your your Splunks, your third-party SIMs, anything, your Slack channels, if you wanted to hook do a webhook, because alerting is important. You don't just want to remediate and forget about it. You need to alert that, hey, something happened. I'm going to take action. And then this is just saying, hey, I published the message. And then again, Project Lockdown runs in write and read mode. And specifically for the demo, I wanted to make it run in write mode. So it's saying, hey, it's in write mode, updating the TLS policy, moving it to TLS 1.1. And here you go, updating the policy, TLS update successful. And then the function, the entire execution took about 3 seconds. So think about that from a time standpoint and how important it is to automate some of these kind of quote unquote easy or Boolean true, false, yes, no scenarios. 3 seconds is way faster than generating a log, going to a SOC, having a ticket created. It's just the right way to go, but you need to make sure that you're writing your policy correctly so that you're not incorrectly changing resources in your environment. So kind of for respect of everyone's time, I would love to go through more, but there's just not enough time for the demo. But I'm going to be hanging out for at least a half hour in the Slack channel. If you all are interested in seeing more, or if you want me to create like a YouTube video about how it works, I'm totally happy to. So for now, I'm going to switch back to the slides so that we can wrap this up and start our weekend. All right, so some of the key takeaways here. You want to pick, anytime you're doing security automation, you want to pick the solution that's best for you and your organization. Think about the cost, think about the level of support you need. Do you need enterprise level support, follow the sun 24/7, or are you good to do it on your own? You don't need support. So think about those when you're selecting your tools, because there needs to be more than one. You can't just rely on event-driven automation for everything. I wish that were the case, but unfortunately, ideally, you would have everything I mentioned and you'd be all set. But so got to pick and choose your solution. Second bullet point's really important. Invocate only when necessary. Make sure that your filters and your log syncs are as specific to the scenario as possible. So don't just select a log sync filter that says, give me all updates on GCS buckets. That's gonna, your serverless function, your cloud function is gonna invocate over and over and over again, depending upon how large your environment is. If you only care if a bucket is made public, put that option inside of your log filter and say only when they're trying to add and all users or all authenticated users are a member. So make that as specific as possible. That's going to take you a long way in saving costs as well. And it'll keep down the noise. Protect the remediation identity. What I mean by that is with a tool like Project Lockdown, or really any tool, they need permissions in your environment. And those identities, those members, they need to be protected so that somebody cannot assume them and then inherit their permissions, a form of privilege escalation. So if somebody is doing like a list, like show me all the permissions on this highly sensitive service account in GCP, that's a red flag. You want to make sure that you're looking for that and protecting it as much as possible. Number 4, of case, run in dry mode. So run and read only as much as possible. Second to last, isolate your security tools. I talked about that just a little bit. Make sure everything is in an isolated project. And then last but not least, try to cover all of your deployment options, meaning CI/CD, event-driven, your single pane of glass view, and your IAM controls. All right, that's it. So thanks a lot for coming with me on this journey. I really appreciate everyone hanging out until the very end of the conference, but this has been such an awesome time. I really appreciate it. You can catch me on Twitter. You can check out our ScaleSex website. We're hiring. If you're interested in any other blogs, tools, check it out. There's the Project Lockdown link. Have a good weekend, everyone. Thank you so much.
Jason, that was great. That was awesome. Great talk, great demo. Hey, I loved how you ended with a cliffhanger there, right? You got an extra demo that we didn't get to see after 20 hours of listening to talks and seeing demos. Yeah. People are like, wait, I want to stay for another 30 minutes. Yeah. So nicely done. Very nicely done. To a great way to close it and troll the audience here. I love it.
Thanks, everyone.